This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 405 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. This is the special edition brought to you by Jetlag. I have been here in the country of New Zealand for maybe 3 hours at this point after a marathon 25-hour from takeoff to final touchdown 3-flight marathon. But joining me for this episode here, catty corner adjacent to Freestyle Farms here in, how do you pronounce this, Motair?
Upper Moutere.
Moutere. P. Gillespie, head brewer, founder of Garage Project. Welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora. Welcome. And you're looking surprisingly fresh for somebody who just got off a plane.
I'm working on my strategies for travel. Found an app called Time Shifter, and I've been using its tools to kind of adjust my circadian rhythms. And I did it for several days ahead of the trip. And then through the trip, used their very calculated plan for when to nap, when to sleep, when to take melatonin, when to consume caffeine, and
when to drink a beer.
I snuck some in there. I did. I had a long layover in Auckland because my flight from Auckland to Nelson got canceled. And so, I mean, what are you going to do? You need to go have a beer here. Anyway, we are here in wine and hop country in outside of Nelson, New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so we are going to talk about New Zealand hops, New Zealand brewing, and the intersection of the two. Pete, you are very closely involved in the hop industry here. In addition to, you've got the brewery, obviously, but you all have played such a fundamental role working with hops growers, especially as things have pivoted, changed over in the hop industry, moved out of singular control, gotten into more individual control, and you've helped shape some facets of this in the way that hops connect with brewers, and also helped helped find ways to take these flavors that are possible and show people what more of those things are possible. And, and obviously many more brewers out there do as well, but you have a really close view.
I'm in a privileged position to be able to enjoy hanging out. I mean, I don't know if you can explain what it looks like out that window to your listeners. It's a glorious day in Nelson. And this is one of the reasons why this area grows so many hops, is because it has the highest number of sunshine hours. Unlike Wellington, where Garage Project is based, which is officially the windiest, crappiest city in the world. Crappy weather-wise.
Sure.
Culture is fantastic.
Yeah.
Beer is wonderful. But this is a fruit bowl here. It used to grow a lot of tobacco. When I was young, I remember coming up here, and it was fields and fields of tobacco. That's all gone now. And a lot of it,
wine grapes,
a lot
hops,
of it,
fruit,
a lot of hops. A lot of farmers flipped from tobacco to hop growing. But it's a magic time here, Jamie. Like, you wake up in the morning, and we're moving into autumn, and there'll be like a mist lying across the kind of like the low hills here, and you can just smell the hops. You can smell them. You can smell what they're harvesting. Some mornings you can even wake up and go, "Oh, that's Nelson Sauvin." Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
That and the nexus with the sea air, and that. I mean, it smells beautiful out here.
It'll be bloody good for your circadian rhythms, I tell you.
I'm going to soak up this sun. In fact, I should be soaking up some more sun here. So as soon as we wrap this, I'll go stand out and soak in the sun. Anyway, it is beautiful right now, stunning. You see a lot of the commonalities here with this area, the broader Nelson area, and say, certain parts of California, that same kind of coastal mountains, alluvial plains that, that there's a lot of similarity there. And obviously I think it's just a little not as developed here as it is in California, shockingly.
Definitely not.
And so
for better or worse.
Exactly. Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. We're going to talk about, how Pete and Garage Project are so involved with developing hops, working on hop flavor in this kind of test lab, obviously with Hāpi Research that they are involved in and doing some cool stuff as well. We'll talk about all of those things. But first, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years because brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, and nor do they. These quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. And with their 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need and gain peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment? With Berkeley Yeast, it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Also, a day in the life of a brewer is packed enough as it is, so why not let Old Orchard assist with R&D. Custom blend development is available through their innovative R&D lab. Their bulk division supplies a wide range of beverage segments, making it the one-stop shop for flavoring beer and beyond. For more information and free samples, they're waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Pete, we normally start off with some background. So what's yours? Trace for us your arc through beer into brewing.
My origin story.
How that has led through Garage Project to where you are now.
My very first experiences brewing were with my grandfather. He was an avid home brewer in Scotland. I was born in Scotland.
Where in Scotland?
In Edinburgh. But my grandfather lived in a place called Falkirk, which is between Edinburgh and Glasgow. And he would homebrew, and I used to hang out with him. We were very close. And still to this day, Jamie, there'll be a moment where I'm in the brewery and there's something about aroma, isn't it? And memory, and I'll just catch a little whiff of something and it almost will take me right back there.
You've seen the Disney movie Ratatouille?
Yeah.
It captures it perfectly. I've mentioned it in writing before. And, we see the same thing all the time. That's that scene with Ego, the critic, when he has that dish.
That's right.
And it just brings back these childhood memories. And it's the same. I mean, the power, the sense memory, and that connection is so powerful.
Yeah, it is. So that's where it all began. I was tiny. I've told this story before, but I bought my grandfather a giant wooden spoon for him to stir the wort with. And when he died, I was helping to tidy his house up, and I found the spoon, and it really wasn't very big at all. It was probably 50 centimeters long, but I was bloody tiny, so it felt big at the time. And then look, I went off and did all sorts of other things. I studied for a very long time, but I was a keen home brewer, and eventually I just got to the point where I was like, look, if I don't pursue this, I will forever feel that I'm unsatisfied, that I will have an itch that I never scratched. It's a common theme, isn't it? I love how brewing, more so than any other profession I know, encourages people to give up perfectly good careers and very high wages so that they can muck around, get covered in yeast and work 14-hour days. There must be something in there, isn't there? Yeah.
There is. Well, and the ones that come at it from that perspective tend to be the ones that can also somehow find their way through the worst of all of the shit that comes along with that too, right? Because running a brewery is hard. It's incredibly hard. Yeah. And it will try to beat you down every single day.
I should point out that I don't tend to get covered in yeast very often anymore. I have a delightful team of very excellent young brewers who enjoy that thoroughly. My first brewing job professionally, I had been living in Australia, and I actually, to be honest with you, Foster's. Do you remember Foster's?
Oh yeah, oil can.
So I sent Foster's bottles off to the UK with a little message in a bottle, like a letter stuffed in it. And basically it was like, the beer here's shit. Help me out. I want to learn how to brew over there. And luckily, I've had quite a few breweries get back to me and be like, oh, cool. Do you want to come over and have a chat? And I got a job.
Oh, you just mailed them to them.
We just sent them empty bottles of Foster's with a letter rolled up inside it. And yeah, I ended up getting a job.
It's a clever pitch.
It worked. My first job was at Breakspears, which was a remarkable real ale brewery on the bank of the Thames in Henley-on-Thames. It had been going for 250 years. And it was a brewery that had been built at that time where industrial architecture was beautiful. It was like a cathedral. It was stained glass windows, giant copper kettles, spiral wrought iron staircases, wood. It was all 100% whole cone hops. It was the most, for somebody who loves beer and brewing and a little bit of history, it was remarkable. It was probably the most romantic brewing spot ever. I mean, lots of hard work, obviously, but incredible. Sadly, it shut down about 8 months after I'd started, not due to me. It was the most the most expensive real estate in the whole of the UK in Henley-on-Thames, and they decided to turn the brewery itself into flats for people working in London.
Yeah.
And then they sold the beer brand to a group called Refresh, who have Witchwood, and they continued also to run the Tide estate, if you know how old British breweries used to work.
Right.
So then I managed to get another job.
Used to be. There's still quite a bit of it.
And then I worked at another brewery called Hepworth & Co. in a place called Horsham, just outside London. And they were a much more kind of rough and ready. They were a group of refugees from another regional brewery who had pulled their redundancies and basically cobbled together a brewery. And I mean, that was wonderful. As a young brewer, it was fantastic working there because we did a lot of contract brewing for very small real ale breweries. Anyone who had a success, won an award, these little real ale breweries, I mean, they had no packaging equipment, no way of making any kind of angle on that success. So we would brew for them, package for them. We had a fantastic packaging line. So every week I'd just be like, doing wonderful new breweries. Oh, it's great fun.
Yeah. Real Ale, the original draft only brewery, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's so there was so many of them because they were so simple. You brew often in an open top fermenter, and then just run them straight into casks, whack the top on, and off they go. Mm-hmm. I mean, at their best, casks are, as you know, like the most wonderful beer you can possibly have. So reliant, though, on obviously the publican knowing what they're up to. And also, what I loved about it was just how it creates an incredibly aware and active drinking audience who are quite happy to bring a beer back and say, this is not up to snuff. I love that. It's fantastic. So it's
an interesting position to take as someone who sells beer to those people.
It is, but I loved it over there. I mean, I think maybe, having been in Australia for a long time where, people will drink pretty much anything as long as it's -1 degree.
Right.
At the taps, I loved just how...
People that care about it.
How, excited and interested and aware the drinkers were, those real ale brewery drinkers. Then when I finished at Hepworth & Co., I went back to Australia and I worked at the Malt Shovel in Sydney for about 5 years. But during that time, I was trying, for the last 3 of those years, I was trying to set up a brewery in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney. Gorgeous place, stunning. And I was commuting down about 200 Ks a day to go and work in Sydney. But trying to set up this brewery. And Jamie, never in my life had I come across the bureaucracy in New South Wales at the time. It's a lot better now, and there's now, I'm so pleased to say, a wonderful brewery in the Blue Mountains called Mountain Culture. So I don't know if you've ever chatted with DJ. They're fantastic. So he managed to pull it off.
They're going to be around this week.
They'll be around, definitely. They love New Zealand hops. So I tried there for 3 years. I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast on all the stuff I went through trying to make that work.
Before ultimately giving it up.
at 3 years, the frustration was so intense. And eventually, I rang up my younger brother, who was living in Wellington in New Zealand. And I said, this is ridiculous. And he said, why don't you just take a break? Come over to Wellington. So I did. I flew over. And so my brother Ian is 11 years younger than me. And he was working in Wellington with Joss Ruffle, who is his lifelong friend, heterosexual life partners.
Sure.
They were born 2 houses apart, 2 months apart on the same street in Christchurch in New Zealand. I used to babysit Joss when he was little. And so I arrived. Joss had been working in the computer games industry and had seen what was going on in America, loved craft beer. It gets under people's skin, and he had that real otaku thing about it. He just loved it so much. And he was like, you should move here. This is incredible. We just need a brewery here. And this was the thing. 57% of all the craft beer in New Zealand was drunk in Wellington, and there was not a single brewery. I was like, why? After 3 years of battling in Australia, I was like, this is a trap. Why? There must be a good reason why there's no brewery here. So, I went to the council and I said, why is there no brewery here? What would you do to stop me? And they said, nothing. We'd love you to. That'd be bloody great. And I went to the customs and excise people. And I said, what would you do to stop me? And they said, no, absolutely nothing, as long as you pay your excise. That'd be great. So, I sold my house. My poor long-suffering family all moved over with me. And within 6 months, we managed to get Garage Project set up and off the ground. And I mean, when I say set up, we didn't really have an awful lot of money.
It was the name described the scale of the business at that point.
So we managed to find a completely derelict petrol station in this wonderful little valley up the back end of Wellington. It's like a temperate rainforest valley, sort of damp, dark, and in the 70s, it was a real hippie suburb in Wellington. And this petrol station, completely disused, completely derelict down the bottom. And we somehow managed to talk the landlord into letting us move in. And basically, we bought a 50-litre pilot plant. It's all we could really afford. Definitely, it was the first, it's the smallest commercial brewery I'd ever worked at. And we decided to start and do something a bit different. You've got to understand, Jamie, that even at that time, this was 2011, there were a lot of breweries in New Zealand per head of population. We're a very small country, but we've always had a pretty vibrant brewing culture. But they were breweries that were brewing very true to type beers. They would be the Pilsner, the Pale Ale, the Stout, So we decided that, really what was the point in starting doing something the same as everybody else. We had to do
so many breweries opening in that 2011 to 2013, 2015 kind of time frame. The same thing. There's this classic idea of beer and craft beer.
Yep.
But then there's this other thing that we can also do.
Yep. So we did something at the time, it felt really audacious. We did 24 beers in 24 weeks. So it was 6 months. Every week we would launch a completely brand new beer. And I mean, look, it was wonderful to just be free to be as creative as I wanted to be, but also equally terrifying because you would literally have 2 20-litre kegs and we would take them down to the kind of craft beer HQ. There was like one
beer
craft beer bar. There were lots of craft beer bars in Wellington, but this was definitely the pointy end,
Exactly. Sure.
So
the geekiest of the geeky.
We would take our 2 20-litre kegs down on a Tuesday night and it would go on tap at 5 o'clock. And I mean, it didn't take very long for this cult following to start coming along. And if you didn't turn up at 5 o'clock and queue, chances are you wouldn't get a go.
Sure.
So it would often be just gone by the next day. So, and obviously that made no financial sense, Jamie. It was madness. But
no, because you're making such a small amount of beer.
Absolutely.
And then whatever you can sell that keg for to that, it's not going to be enough
to
pay for that in any possible way.
No, so I mean, I managed to survive those.
Sure.
First. But what we did do, Jamie, was create a brand and a following and interest. And then
we see that so often. I think, even breweries that started with a, say, US 1 or 2 barrel system.
Yeah.
And it's not, you can't build a business plan generally to make that work long term.
No.
It's incredibly hard. Rare occasions you can, but those that have done it, Burial Beer started that way.
Yeah.
Aslan in Virginia started that way. Every brewer there says that having to brew every day, sometimes twice a day, gave us this discipline and gave us a laboratory to learn from, because we were brewing so often that we got to change things all the time, and that created that exactly that spirit of experimentation and constant improvement, that Kaizen.
Absolutely.
Since we're using our Japanese terms through this one.
Yep. It does. It gets into your DNA.
Sure.
And you, I mean, for a while at Garage Project, we decided that we weren't even going to have a core range,
right.
And at the time that was unheard of. I mean, now there are lots of breweries doing this, but at the time that felt kind of audacious. But in the end, we ended up having a core range because people just got really pissed off with us if we didn't have the beer. So things like Pernicious Weed, that was one of the first beers we ever brewed. It's still going strong.
Yeah.
And that is an interesting beer because, I mean, almost a segue into hops. It's a beer, a very old school West Coast IPA at its heart, but all New Zealand hops. Nelson and Riwaka. It was this kind of classic. Well, I mean, I don't know. We found these two hops that seem to go incredibly well together. They're almost synergistic. Nelson, if you know it by itself, and I mean, brewers all around the world now use it, but it can be very kind of Sauvignon Blanc, white winey, gooseberry forward, a little bit of weed in the background, but it can be very, it's very bright. If you put
there's that fresh, sometimes I'll just describe it as like a white floral character or linen.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. Marry it with Riwaka. Riwaka is almost like a best supporting actor. I don't know if I would ever do 100% Riwaka beer and expect it to do great, but God, you put it with something else, and it is, and I'm fascinated with these supporting hops that will then elevate and change the hop that you put it with. So, Riwaka and Nelson together, mind-blowing. It's fantastic.
Supporting hops for New Zealand hops. Okay, Pete, you're speaking my language. We're going to have to dive deeper into that, and we absolutely will. But first, taste the modern flavors of indie hops at CBC this year in Indianapolis. Join Indy for 14 incredible collab beers to showcase Strata, Luminosa, Lorien, Audacia, Meridian, and more. Experience their newest hop, Audacia, in both a hazy IPA by Fidens and a West Coast IPA by Grains of Wrath. Dive the depths of Strata in T90, CGX, and Hyperboost forms with IPAs by Craft Coast and Flatland Brewing. Refresh your palate with the crisp, summery flavors of Lorien and an Italian Pils by Maui Brewing and a French Pils by Upright Brewing, and bask in the liquid sunshine magic of Luminosa with IPAs from Fort George and Bearlick Brewing. Check out the full CBC beer lineup at www.indiehops.com and plan to stop by their booth number 3122. They'll be as happy to see you as you'll be that you made the effort. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And upgrade your fermentation game with Unitank 2.0 from SS Brewtech, featuring a laser-welded cooling jacket for efficient and precise temperature control, an innovative silicone racking arm, and a carbonation stone that lets you carbonate right in the fermenter. Unitank 2.0 is engineered to help you get the most out of your fermentations. Available from 7-gallon up to 1-barrel sizes, Unitank 2.0 will be right at home in your homebrew setup or producing pilot batches at your commercial brewery. Visit ssbrewtech.com to learn more. Let's talk a little more about Pernicious Weed, because I love this idea of supporting hops. We've talked about this in the past with a number of different brewers. I think Hop Butcher was one of my favorites. Where Jude and Jeremy they've got their bangers, and they've got another term for some of these supporting hops. Those hops that may just make they get the assists. Yeah, they're the ones that they don't. They're
not flashy.
They're not putting points on the board.
Nope.
But they're setting up those goals. Yeah.
It was funny that you just had an indie hop advert there, because I find that particularly with Luminosa and Audacia to some extent, they're best supporting actors. I mean, they're not the lead star, they're not up there in the lights, but you put them alongside something else and they just create kind of like a breadth of flavor. Sometimes these hops are bringing almost like a kind of it sounds wrong to say generic fruit sweetness, but it brings like a breadth to the flavor that just then it forms a foundation which you can then build on top of. But then having said that, like Nelson Sauvin's also, it is a superstar, stands alone, but it also works really well with others. There's so many classic beers with it in, where it's the interplay of Nelson with something else, and it goes off in these wonderful directions. It can go off with grapefruit. It can become intensely tropical. But the thing with pernicious
I do want to talk about that a little bit, about that kind of terroir impact on Nelson, and maybe we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's because that is fascinating. There are significantly different terroirs depending on where you all, and Freestyle does, grow in different kinds of terroirs. There's I talked about it on the podcast with Connor from Offset, Garston hops, way down south of, very different, kind of environment than here. They sent me pictures of it snowing down there.
Yeah, I visited there a couple of harvests ago, and they were trying to pick hops, and it had just snowed. Yeah. That's the challenge down there, is that wonderful, snappy and cold in winter, lots of sunshine, but geez, winter's coming at you like a freight train. You got to get the hops in.
Sure. You had Nelson Lakes up here, which is a different terroir. They're getting rained on right now, potentially, while it's nice and sunny down here. And so there's this entire, and then there's different kinds of soils in each of these, and even farms in this kind of area have different, potentially different soils, and that creates. Anyway, let's talk about that. But I want to talk before we go down that road and talk about the impacts on Nelson and those point guard hops. Let's talk about pernicious weed itself. I love this idea of a classic old school West Coast IPA. What does that mean to you, coming at it from a New Zealand perspective? Because for me, that means you're going to have a fair amount of crystal malt in there and have a decent amount of color. That's very different than this modern interpretation, where it's lean, Pilsner malt.
Absolutely.
And
so it does have a little touch of color to it, which is rather novel these days, isn't it?
Sure.
But the thing is, with that beer, we've never changed the recipe. And look, occasionally we've fiddled with other recipes, but pernicious weed has stayed identical for 14 years.
Huh.
But the beer we're drinking now is so radically different to how it tasted before. And the reason for that is entirely the hops and the way that the way they're being grown, but particularly the way that they are being picked. And this is the thing. I don't know if you want to jump
So
in
the recipe is exactly the same.
The recipe's the same, but we have...
Hop addition timing is all the same?
Everything is, all exactly the same. The only change is the hops that we source to brew it. And it's taken it from being...
how they're grown, when they're picked.
Particularly when they're picked.
Okay.
I think that, and we could chat about that in a minute, but that has to be the number one thing that distinguishes the way hops taste. It's fascinating. But pernicious weed used to be, intense grapefruit, with that kind of like weedy back note.
Right.
And now we're getting masses of, delicious tropical, sometimes it's a bit passion fruit, mango, papaya, and it's no change to the recipe. It's simply that the change in the hops has kept it contemporary. It's made it more contemporary, which I think is fascinating, eh?
That is fascinating.
A bit lazy for me. I've done bugger all, but it's...
Well, you could say that, but it just means you've got to spend more time rolling around here at hop selection time.
Yeah.
And then, but then also working directly with growers to get what you want and get those picked at the right times. And also helping to understand what that is.
Yeah.
Being able, because now you're having to work with growers and track exactly how that looks on a day-to-day basis in this harvest window to say, hey, this is, if this hangs for another day or two, it's going to develop more of this. Like even building that kind of knowledge base has been something that has to then, like there's had to be a lot of work put into that over the last 10 years.
It's also, I find it really stimulating. I mean, I remember when I brewed in the UK, we would actually do hop selection back then. So when I was at Breakspears and then at Hepworth and Co., they would go not to the farmers, but to, like a hop merchant in Kent.
Sure.
And they would come out from the back with these, have you ever seen those beautiful little cubes wrapped up in purple paper? Why is it purple paper? With a little brass pin holding it together, almost like kind of origami. It's like something you'd get in Japan, but it's not. This is Kent. And you'd unwrap these little kind of like paper parcels, and inside would be the whole cone hops, and you'd inspect them and rub them and really get amongst it and select your hops based on that. I mean, that was a wonderful experience to have. I then moved back to Australia, and then suddenly that connection was just gone. It was gone. A bag would turn up, like a foil bag, and at that time as well, if you managed to track down some mosaic, you were like, oh my God, high five, we've got mosaic. There was no talk about where it came from. You certainly weren't selecting it. You just managed to lay your hands on a hop. And I mean, look, it was still wonderful. But losing that connection is sad, I think. I mean, we're in a winery here. I'm always slightly envious, and this is a very rare thing because I'm not really envious of winemakers at all. But they're surrounded by the thing that, the base ingredient for their product. And that is incredible to have that connection.
Tells the story immediately. You get to see the story in action if you're a customer here.
Absolutely. And the care and attention that you can have, and just the control as the maker of the wine to be able to have your ingredient on site as well. There are very few breweries who've managed to pull that off. I think there's one I know of in Australia, in Tasmania. And I'm just having a senior moment. I'll come back to that one.
Sure. But the number of estate breweries in the world is very, very low.
Very small. And also because we want hops from all around the world. We've all got ADHD. We all want the colorful, shiny things.
And there are very specific places where hops grow well and become a viable crop.
Yep.
The agronomics work and all of that. And,
yeah, totally. So for me, being able to reconnect with farmers, to be in the fields with them when they're picking their hops, to understand what they're trying to do, their motivations. And look, we've been incredibly lucky to have such a close relationship with Freestyle in New Zealand. It's made a huge difference. I love it. I always find if my energy levels are dropping slightly, at the beginning of a year, you've done Christmas, it's huge, it's like, another year, here we go. And then harvest comes around and it tops you right back up again. Your little batteries all full after this. I love it.
It's interesting for us, because, in the United States, obviously harvest is a fall thing and fall down here is March. And so it's a different kind of cycle. But there's also just something spectacular about the energy around it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We all get excited, and most brewers I know, there's a certain kind of brewer that just will never miss hop harvest because it's
fantastic.
Such a special thing.
And it's the same up. I mean,
I am thrilled to be able to experience hop harvest here. I've been to the Sāds region in Czech Republic. I've been to a couple of harvests in Yakima, but had never been to New Zealand hop harvest. And here we are this year.
You're gonna love it
to get the experience of it. But let's go back and talk about pernicious weed a little bit more before we get into it. So really it is just the exact, no other changes, obviously different brew house now. And so you've had to translate, from a small, very tiny brew house up to, and scale that to a larger brew house.
Yep, that has been the case. And the only other change we've had is that at one point, I think probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we made the decision to move exclusively to New Zealand grown malt. We just felt from a sustainability perspective that shipping things, I mean, very occasionally we will use, Wyman. I love Wyman's. I mean, it's not that I don't love these other malts, but there's a fantastic maltster called Gladfield's down in Canterbury here. And quite often, Jamie, fresh beats everything else. When I brewed in the UK, there was a malt called Optic, and the Brits love varietal malts.
Right.
You've got Maris Otter, obviously the superstar, but there's Chariot and Halcyon and all of these different ones, and they each have their own distinctive flavor. Golden Promise. I loved Optic. I thought Optic was absolutely the duck's nuts. It was fantastic, and I was
sure.
I always thought when I get a brewery, when I get my own brewery, I'm only going to use Optic. It's going to be amazing. So we started Garage Project. I got some Optic in. I was so disappointed. I mean, it's the tyranny of distance, Jamie. So, we are the opposite side of the world. And, and I think at that moment, I was just like, there's maybe trying to find, not being dogmatic about it, trying to find something local and fresh is really the way to go. And, we love what we're getting now. So
especially when you're talking about colored malts like that too.
Yes.
Anything there that age, it's just like coffee, or it's just, there's just so many parallels that you come up with that, where that with freshness absolutely does have, there's an increasing number of factors that brewers are paying attention to, especially with these. And I think I can't wait to see as more research comes around about how, these different kilned malts impact, we're now talking about fan levels. We're now talking about metals. Like there's lots and lots of things that are going into these conversations now. We seem to have, we now have so much more visibility into what these things are.
And even thiol precursors. I mean, we in New Zealand aren't allowed to use genetically modified yeast.
Sure.
So this is something that we watch from afar with some interest. But, you're getting to the point now with some of these thiolized yeasts that you almost don't even need to add hops. You can just add...
Don't you say that.
Well, in theory,
that back.
You wash your mouth out. But it's fascinating, isn't it?
We can't have that message going on here. Come on. No, I will.
It certainly won't be happening here.
Yeah. No, and I have. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, tasted. Had a rep from a company bring some of their yeast-derived monoterpene products, and they're interesting. And there is a use case for them, and it can be done.
Yeah.
But I will say that hops plants are pretty wonderful, amazing things. And then nature is pretty good at, creating something that, because you needed, these plants needed to accomplish something, and they, so by being appealing, they have, anyway.
You're preaching to the converted, Jamie. I really, yes. And it is, and this little patch here, Harvest, is a celebration of everything hoppy. That's fantastic. Like I said, super energizing.
Well, let's go back and talk about some of these supporting actor hops, because I think that's a fascinating one. And then also I would love to talk about how this terroir and pick timing impacts Nelson Sauvin.
Yeah.
Because that's also fascinating, and something that I want to learn from you now too.
Yeah.
Before we do that, did you know that Isuzu trucks have been the best-selling low cab forward trucks in America every year since 1986? That's right, Pete. For over 38 years, the legendary durability, remarkable performance, and low cost of ownership of Isuzu trucks have made them a favorite for work truck owners. You may have seen their ultimate craft beer truck that debuted at the Craft Brewers Conference in 2019, and it has been there every year since. As members of the Brewers Association, they've partnered with breweries, suppliers, and distributors alike to support the craft beer industry. Whether you're looking for a self-distribution solution or one to deliver supplies, there's an Isuzu truck that will fit your needs. Go to IsuzuCV.com to check out their impressive lineup, or visit an Isuzu dealer today to find out why now, more than ever, Isuzu trucks are the trucks you trust for the work you do. Also, protecting your beer's highest quality is crucial to maintain its unique taste and prevent spoilage organisms, and microbiological testing plays a vital role in this process. Cytiva offers a comprehensive portfolio of laboratory filtration products designed for both lab and production floor use. Their products are portable, affordable, and suitable for any size craft brewing operation, and they support a wide range of applications, including microbiology analysis, to detect spoilage organisms during manufacturing through final product release and shelf life studies, general filtration for degassing and yeast removal, and analytical chemical analysis of raw materials and final products. Discover how Cytiva can help you protect the quality of your beer today. Visit beerandbrewing.com/Cytiva. That's CYTIVA to learn more. And if you're launching a brewery or acquiring an existing one, consider our brewery workshop, a new brewery accelerator, September 14th through 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Over 4 days, we engage in panel discussions, technical brewery tours, networking, and small working group sessions that help you better understand and prepare for the challenges of brewery operation. Tickets are on sale now. Visit breweryworkshop.com for more information and to secure your spot. Pete, this jet lag isn't hurting me. If I was,
you're doing great.
I don't know. There's some technical terms in these.
You go, girl. Rates. You're doing awesome.
All right. I might become a new. I might have to subscribe to Time Shifter now, and continue to pay for that.
Induce jet lag on yourself.
Yeah. We will see. Anyway, let's talk about pick timing. First, and talk about some of the work that you guys have done on pick timing, particularly around Nelson, but obviously also with a range of other hops now grown here in this area.
Yep. I mean, look, my introduction to this kind of element of hop growing and production is all through Freestyle and Dave Dunbar, who has been running Freestyle. So, do you want us to go back in time?
Sure.
Through the mists of time, Jamie. To when we first started Garage Project, there was one hop entity in New Zealand hops, producing fantastic hops. I mean, as everyone knows, you'll remember Sierra Nevada's sort of Southern Hemisphere harvest beers.
I do remember that one.
I mean, these hops had been coming out for a while. I mean, already you had Nelson Sauvin.
Alpine beers.
Alpine Nelson. Yeah. I mean, which is still a stunning beer. So, Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Riwaka, were all sort of already happening, were great. I mean, fantastic hops. But there was just one entity and there was no selection or anything. If you were particularly enamored with one farmer's work.
If you want to see that today, there's another hop company not too far from, I guess, yeah. Anyway, there is another model for that,
Look, I mean...
even though Hops Product Australia is opening up a bit.
They are. And definitely. And this is the thing. Look, it's worth talking about this. Right. I understand the rationale behind the idea of collecting all of the hops,
sure,
putting them together, and homogenizing. Because, the argument obviously is, as you know, Jamie, is that then you get, a guaranteed brand for that hop. You take out the low points, you take out the high points, and you just get something that's guaranteed. If it's Mosaic, it's going to taste like Mosaic. If it's Nelson, it's going to taste like Nelson. You just get that guaranteed flavor. I understand.
I loved that at Bohemia Hops and Jatet's. We literally had the panel of the homogenizer.
Yeah.
And I took a picture of the homogenizer panel because, it's such a antithetical thing for so many American brewers. Like, I want the exact lot,
yep.
And in that kind of circumstance. Now it's a little different there. Even there, you could select your own and have different lots, but they would still want as a brewer, you would want to homogenize your own lots.
Yeah.
So that throughout the course of the year, you are producing, even if you are not taking some bigger, broader homogenized version from the hop producer, that every, all what you got to brew was going to be consistent through the year.
And look, I spent a day in multiple fields this morning, and even within a hop field, you'll get all sorts of variations. So a certain amount of homogenization is worthwhile. But for me,
you say all sorts. What is that kind of variation within a single field?
Gosh, it can be huge, Jamie. Yeah. So quite often on the edges, the hops on the edge of a field will be far more developed. They're getting full sun. They're not tucked away.
It's gonna be a little bit warmer out there. They can
they're open. Cool. They're open to the elements, and they tend to mature faster. They also will be maybe like more battered with the wind. And this is an interesting thing. When I used to select hops with the head brewers in England, they would look for wind damage, and it was bad. We don't want any wind, any browning of the hops. We just want them to look lovely and green. Now, you know that a lot of the aroma that comes from hops is a stress response. I mean, it's if a hop thinks that it's being attacked, it will actually increase the amount of aromatic compounds it's releasing because they are deterrents.
Just like these Sauvignon Blanc wine grapes.
Exactly.
Here, you stress them on purpose in order to produce these kinds of characterful things that all of us who drink those wines enjoy from them. And so, yeah.
So it's meant to deter, but of course, it does the opposite to brewers, doesn't it? It draws us in. I heard something, you probably know about this. There was a variety of Citra that somebody had developed that was virus-free, and they tried growing it, and it didn't deliver any of the same kind of aroma highs because where was the stress? No virus, no stress. It's fascinating. Obviously, you can go too far and you can stress a plant to a bad place. But it is fascinating. And those edges of the field will often be, the most high stressed.
Right.
They're a really good indication of where things will get to further on if you let them hang. Going into the field, there'll be different patches in the ground. There'll be wet patches, dry patches. I mean, farmers know everything about their field. There's a little subterranean stream running here. You can see that the hops are greener on that little section. Something happened here one year and it's just a little bit more stressed. So, when you walk in, essentially you need to sort of wander around the whole field, pick a selection of all of the cones from different plants, put them together, do your own little homogenization, and then you get a sense of where it's at. But
because there is literally no way to get a row. I mean, it's incredibly hard.
A lot of people do wet, they'll do
right.
sort of like, dry weight, wet weight. But there's nothing. There is no.
You can do a single batch if you have some good friends who are a hop grower and you drive to the farm and you cut those specific binds down.
But
and then get them right into the kettle right there, which we have done. And you can watch that on our craft beer brewing class on Fresh Hop Brewing with Single Hill and Yakima.
Yep.
That is a way that you can do it. It's not a very common way.
No.
I wouldn't try to repeat it because unless you are in a hop growing region, it is very hard to pull that off.
We've done it here. We've dragged a pilot plant into a hop field and done it. And wonderful and romantic. Fact is, though, even that, you could taste the wort and see how it's tasting. But these hops will change. If you're not there every day checking, Dave's there every day checking,
right.
They will go too far or, things that you thought were fine and you can just forget about them suddenly rush on and become ripe. This is the thing to understand. Hops are not just a commodity. You can't just pick them based on weight. They're like fruit. You want to be able to pick them when they're at their ripest and they taste and smell at their best. And honestly, sometimes during harvest, watching Dave trying to do this, wandering around the fields, while everything is coming ripe at the same time, it's an incredible juggling act. It's like playing chicken. That thing where two cars racing at each other. There's Dave at the wheel of the kind of the aroma vehicle racing towards senescence as these hops decide that maybe this is enough. Maybe I'm just going to pull all my goodies down into the roots and call it quits for the year. In which case, you're going to lose that field. It's fascinating.
Right. While also then having to balance all the other human, the labor, the planning.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to figure out how you can optimize for this, but also run a business at the same time with the limited, resources for processing all of these kinds of things. It's a real juggling act.
And the harvest is interesting. It's a slow burn to start with. So, you start with some Pacifica, move on to Motueka, then the Riwaka will start to sneak in and surprise you and be ready then. Then a Cascade is our New Zealand Cascade, which is, I don't know if there might be some people out there who haven't tried it. It's radically different.
It is
because
radically.
Because of the terroir here. It's radically different to American. But then suddenly all the Nelson will just start to come on. And then it's like this giant I mean, we're allowed to say it's a clusterfuck. You know, all the fields will be coming on, and you're trying to get it all in at the same time. I think in the past, a lot of hop growers would say, well, look, you know, to avoid the clusterfuck, let's just try and harvest madly now, and we'll just pull everything in. But if you do that, you're often picking hops before they're ready, you know. And if you pick and you dry a hop before it's reached that optimal stage, sometimes you've just got a bale of straw, essentially.
So if you are rubbing Nelson Sauvin,
yep,
and you know, what does a early pick Nelson tend to convey since so early forward, and then what is a maybe picked a little too late, you know, Nelson hit you, and then where do you find the variations kind of along the spectrum there?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's worth pointing out that early Nelson isn't bad. I mean, it's just not. It's just different. And late Nelson, you know, it really depends on the beer you're trying to make. The brewery, I mean,
I love fresh Orval and I love aged Orval.
Exactly.
You know, they're both great.
There we go.
They're both great.
If you wanted to talk about the characteristics, it's interesting. It's bookended with.
But we can see, you know, on Yakima, you know, in the Pacific Northwest, like things start going heavily onion garlic at the end of harvest. You can really tell. And there's a balance there too, because some of that's great. Yeah.
I would say it's bookended by garlic at both ends. So early,
both ends,
really early, you will have in a lot of not just Nelson, but you know, Waimea.
Sure.
Waimea is another hop that does this. You'll have onion garlic, and think about it. Those are sulfur compounds, aren't they? And those same sulfur compounds, when they develop, will become all sorts of other, you know, wonderful things potentially. But then you're right. If it goes too far, you can get that kind of nasty, savory onion garlic character at the end. But if you had to talk about Nelson Sauvin, the really early stuff, and this is probably the same for Motueka as well, early tends to be more kind of like citrusy, brighter, you know, clean. And then as it moves through, you start to develop those really rich, you know, heavy mango, passion fruit is something that I like to find that in a Nelson Sauvin, and I like it when it comes through in my beer, and that kind of like passion fruity, rich, sweet, tropical character is what you get. For me, that's characteristic of that really late picked. And yeah, sure, if you overdo it, Jamie, then yeah, savory. I don't know, savory hops. Maybe there's a place. Maybe at our wild site we could get away with that, but it's not what I'm wanting for pernicious weed or anything else.
Have you now over the number of years found that you are consistently taking your Nelson picked in certain windows from the same fields?
No. And it's interesting. I mean, this year feels quite different to last year.
Really?
Last year was a wicked drought here, and I mean, really, I mean, there are a lot of hop growers who were panicking and feeling like they had to bring things in because otherwise they were going to lose everything. And I mean, that's terrifying. When you're gambling everything on one harvest a year. I get to brew every day, you know, a bit different for them. So, you know, I'd love to say that certain fields, and I mean, I've got to know some of the fields, but each season's a bit different. Yeah. Fun to be around.
Interesting. It looks like this harvest season isn't going to, in fact, I'm not even going to say what I was going to say because I might jinx it.
Don't.
Yeah.
Don't jinx it.
Let's not do that. Let's not say that at all. We'll just say that the weather's beautiful right now.
The weather is beautiful
and
right now.
It was supposed to be rainy down here today, and it's not. It's sunny and nice.
So picking window is crucial, and having that, you know, the willingness to push hops because, you know, potentially you're also earning fractionally less because they're lighter the later they are. So, you know, from traditional farming perspective, why the hell would you do that? But the thinking obviously is you've got something special, you can ask for a bit more money for it and a little bit more care and attention. So that's the picking window. But then obviously terroir, it is important. It's a wine word. Should you be using it for hops? I think you should. I think that the soil even on one farm, you'll have different blocks with different characteristics, and that will come through in the hops. Sometimes it's the stress again. It's a field is, maybe a little bit lighter on organic matter or something. The hops have to try a bit harder, and sometimes that comes through in some fantastic flavors. But also different growing regions. So in New Zealand, they used to grow hops wherever there was a brewery, essentially. Would have been the same everywhere, if you wanted to have a brewery.
Sure.
It's fascinating.
Back when transportation was hard, you had to have you had to grow the things close to where you were making the product.
I don't know if you're going out to visit Nelson Lakes at all. That's the other hop farm. But halfway to Nelson Lakes, it's a 2-hour drive from here south towards Murchison. Halfway there's a river. And we had a big gold rush in New Zealand. There's a river which is obviously prime, kind of like gold hunting area. When you come down this hill, this windy little road beside this idyllic river surrounded by bush, there's a huge load of hops in the middle of nowhere, just hops growing wild on the side of the road. We don't have any wild hops in New Zealand, so these obviously at some point, I like to think, somebody was brewing beer at that spot for thirsty miners, and these hops have just stuck around. They're probably some ancient dull English variety, but they're there. Hanging
but then,
on.
of course, they've been potentially interbreeding and become something completely different than they
absolutely,
once were.
or just mutating gently.
Sure.
And that takes us, if you continue that journey past those wild hops, then you turn up at Nelson Lakes, which is. This is another thing that's changed radically. So, all of the hop growing in New Zealand was concentrated into this kind of little white hot area around Motueka, around Riwaka. They're the words that you know from the hops
because themselves. They're the towns.
Yeah. Tapawera region as well. So that was where all of the hops were growing. And part of the reason for that is that, obviously you need to have a central depot that actually pelletizes and deals with them. So this is brand new. Nelson Lakes only been going, so I think their 3rd commercial season, and they are right out in an area which has never really been a hop growing area. It's surrounded on 3 sides by national parks, so huge mountains, snow-covered at times, covered in rainforest, and then you have this incredible, idyllic 2 rivers coming together, the Tutaki and the Matakitaki. Their confluence, where they come together, is where the hop farming is. And look, honestly, Jamie, I don't know if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, but it looks like if they were growing hops in Lord of the Rings. It is probably one of the most remarkable spots I've ever seen. Fascinating too, because it's the terroir is so different. It also the climate, it's much colder in winter, and much hotter in summer. And this is something that's starting to impact us here, is with climate change. It's getting a lot harder for hop growers to get, you'll know that you need frost to really make a rhizome work properly. It needs a cold winter followed by as much sunshine as it can possibly have. But that cold's important. It sets the rhizome. We're getting less and less frosts here. It's interesting. I was chatting to an old timer a little while ago, and he said that he reckons Nelson Lakes climate is like the climate used to be in Tapawera 20 years ago. It's cold in winter, hot in summer. So, if nothing else...
Just like all of those champagne houses now buying farmland in England. And, I know it's the craziest thing, right? But again, that climate change is impacting them. And I've been reading about this. It's mind-blowing, but English sparkling wine is a growing thing.
Dear God.
And more of these
classic... feels like the 7th seal has been broken when English sparkling wine is the best.
It's bad when the French champagne houses are buying property in England to make sure that they are hedging against some of these climate impacts. But
it's the same in Europe, obviously. Right. We have one beer which was heavily Saaz based, called beer. It's beer. It's just a white can with beer written on it, and it's we've found it harder and harder to source decent sarts out of Europe. It's difficult everywhere.
Let's go back and talk a little bit about some of these supporting hops and and some of the other ways that you have found interesting and cool ways to bring out different characters of some of these New Zealand hops that you work with by making some unexpected pairings or finding ways that certain hops bring out interesting characters in other hops. Are there any as you think about it, you mentioned a few offhand, but we didn't really dive into it. What are a couple of your go-tos? And then talk to us about how you use them. Like, what does that supporting mean? Is that a 25% blend or these 50-50 blends? Do you find certain the way that certain hops work together changes, whether you're talking hot side, cold side, dry hop, or whirlpool or whatnot? Let's kind of dive into some of these combos that you find really interesting and compelling, and then how you pull out some of these characters using some different techniques.
Absolutely. Trying to think of other one. Southern Cross is another fascinating hop. So traditionally in New Zealand, that was a bittering hop, nothing else. Southern Cross, bittering hop. But the last couple of days, I've been wandering fields of Southern Cross, giving them a rub. And it is snazzy. It is a really interesting. It is snazzy. It's very kind of like, bursting with citrus, a little bit of tropical. It's really cool. But then again, that is another one that I think it makes a great supporting actor. Obviously, I think Alpine Nelson might have even had a little bit of that combo.
Oh, yeah?
It just works really well. Again, works super well with Nelson. I think it's fascinating, too, that with, the sudden interest in thiols, people digging into the thiols or precursor thiols that these hops have. Southern Cross is staggering. It's loaded.
Huh.
Yeah, it's the quiet ones you got to watch, isn't it? It's so interesting, which then, of course, if you know about thiols, you guys can open up, full bore with genetically modified yeast, but you can also start to play around in other ways. You can be slipping this stuff into, first wort in mash hopping.
Sure.
Whirlpool additions
right.
Fantastic, The other classic Kiwi thing is Riwaka. Now, Riwaka, if you had to pick a hop that polarizes people, Sriracha Ace maybe a little bit more,
sure.
Riwaka, it's a really interesting hop.
Centennial, yeah.
I remember when Riwaka first came out, and I was brewing in Australia, and I was at the time was like, that has to be the most incredible thing I have ever tasted. It was tropical, like rich, intense tropical with a squeeze of lime on top. If you kind of go down to Mexico or other places, and they'll give you fruit and squeeze a lime on it. It just brings that intensity out. For me, that was Riwaka. That was what it was. And I was like, that is staggering. Oh. And again, by the time we kicked off at Garage Project, we would get Riwaka in. And, sometimes it would be good. Sometimes it would be intensely. There's a petrochemical diesel tang that you can have with that hop that is, frankly, it can be quite off-putting. If it takes over, it's not nice for me anyway.
There's that line where it goes from weedy and dank into just like diesel and overblown.
Yeah. And look, it's really interesting. And this has happened to a lot of hops. We could just, probably wrong to talk about Galaxy here because that's got nothing to do with New Zealand, but it's an interesting thing for hop growers when they find a hop that clicks, something special, and they're all like, bloody hell, this is good. So inevitably it gets planted out, broadly. So the first thing that happens is it leaves the farm where it was first grown and obviously worked really well. And if we're talking about terroir, suddenly it's in different terroir. And that, I feel sure, has at least some impact not insurmountable, but some impact. Then, of course, if it really kicks off, everyone plants so much of it. And then for me, this is the killer, because then suddenly we talked about picking window. You can't pick it all in the right window. You have to pick some of it early because there's just simply no way you can bring it all in the right timing. And so you end up with people inevitably picking early and you're not getting what you want, or picking super late and it's not great either. And then, and I know that this happened to Galaxy, so much of it was picked, it would have to be baled, it would have to be stored, and it would have to wait to be pelletized. And that waiting was not kind to it. It didn't store well. So, and I'm going to do a little plug for Hop Products Australia. I think they're actually now doing a really good job of trying to remediate this problem and get back to a place where people feel confident using it.
And I think that speaks to the challenge with all hops. It's something like when Citra came around, it worked great. The Peralts, had developed this. The reason it became as powerful as it is because it stays pretty consistent and interesting across lots of different growing conditions, lots of different terroirs and farms. And it's been such a standard now because it works. Yeah. But not every hop can do that. No. But then on the flip side, you mentioned waiting and baling, which is a common process in the Pacific Northwest. What's a typical process here in New Zealand?
Freestyle kiln. It goes onto the floor. It cools. They scoop it up. They pelletize
straight into pelletizing.
No bailing process. I've said this to some of our American friends. We're in a position where we can do a wet hop beer. So we'll rush off wet cones to Wellington, throw it in. And then we can dry hop with exactly the same hops from the same day. We have a beer that we generally do at harvest.
You can do that. We've done that with, in fact, Single Hill in the Pacific Northwest. Makes their own pellets that way, and we did a video class with them. But you can just do it with all. It's
unique. Yeah, it's fantastic.
It makes sense if you've got the system here to do that.
And I love that it's there and it's pelletized immediately and straight into a cold room. In that kind of form, and that's it's most stable in that way. So that's just another reason that we really get on super well with them.
In Australia, they're still baling and then pelletizing, or are they coming around?
I think it's quite rare for a hop grower to have their own pelletizer. There's actually a few interesting. I mean, Eggers hops, he has his own pelletizer as well. So it's really interesting. But it's quite rare. So for most people, it's a matter of baling. Right. And then, you send it off and hope that it's pelletized and dealt with in a thoughtful way.
Yeah. Does that change the way that you do sensory? I mean,
Well, it means that we can do our lot selection almost immediately. And that you're getting the finished product as well. When I do hop selection in Yakima, I'm rubbing whole cones, and definitely things happen to a hop in the process of being pelletized. You are doing more violence, in inverted commas, to the hop. So, I mean, I actually quite like doing it on the pellet. I mean, it's what you're going to be brewing with. That's it. So choose wisely.
Pete, let's talk a little bit about Hāpi Research. This is an interesting project for Garage Project as a brewery to get into. We see in the brewing industry lots of, there are always breeders, hop brokers involved in research projects, government research projects, et cetera, but it's rather unusual for a brewery to be a prime mover and partner in agricultural research project. Talk to me a little bit about Hāpi Research, what it is, the kind of drive behind it for you all as a brewery, and then of course what it has now become today, what that actually is, the nature of that entire entity.
Yep. So Hāpi, the word Hāpi is te reo Māori for hops. There were no hops in New Zealand before Pākehā or white people turned up and started planting them wherever they wanted to brew beer. But that's the name that's used. So Hāpi is te reo for hops. And Hāpi Research is an entity which is made up of Freestyle, Garage Project brewery, and then there are a number of universities who are kind of like linked as well. So this is a government-funded enterprise to look into growing techniques, novel brewing techniques with hops, terroir, looking at different growing regions, but also, and perhaps most excitingly as a brewer, is developing new hop varieties. And that's the bit where I come in, because, I mean, I don't know, can it get any more exciting as a brewer to be involved in the process of being there as absolutely brand new hop varieties are being discovered? It's really cool. And our part in it, obviously, Freestyle are growing it. There was a grower whose name is Joe, who in the past has been involved in plant and food research, and is now working with Hāpi Research, and he's developing these new hop varieties. There's a field down at Freestyle. I like to call it Joe's Field of Dreams. And he planted this year with a 3,000 novel, brand new hop varieties in that field, each one a single vine. And so trying to find these new hop varieties is a little bit like sifting through a needle in a haystack in that field. But it's immensely exciting.
Sure. It's interesting because, from a United States perspective, there are many breeding programs in the United States. And, for a long time in New Zealand, there was a breeding program in the United States. And so this, is a different avenue with some different goals, an interesting way to kind of, close the circle between you all as a brewery, looking at practical application of these things, from an agricultural product standpoint.
And this is a thing that we bring as a brewery, is the ability to get hops into a liquid as soon as possible. Obviously there's a lot of things you can do with new hop varieties. You can, assess their sort of oil contents. You can look at them on a chemical level. Obviously there's agronomics, which is hugely important, picking windows. When do they come? Because, you don't want to get another variety that lands exactly where Nelson Sauvin is picking, because then you've pretty much got to uproot Nelson Sauvin, because there's just no more capacity at that stage. But what we can do is get those hops into a beer as soon as possible. So with Joe's brand new varietals, even when they're at that whole cone stage, they've only been grown for 1 year. We're going through selecting down to like 20 really novel, interesting varieties and getting them straight into a beer, normally as a dry hop. And then doing like proper sensory assessment on that beer to just make sure that what you're rubbing is actually going to come through into the beer. Because if it doesn't, you don't want to spend another 5 years developing that hop just to find out that it's not going to do anything exciting.
Sure, you mentioned that brewing techniques also figure into this, too. Yeah. What's the scope of that within Hāpi Research?
We're digging into it now. It's worth pointing out that we have a very strong connection with Auckland University, and they're currently digging into a lot of the hop varieties that we're doing, looking at thiol content, looking at also sort of like esters and terpenes. So there's now a deeper understanding of these new varieties before we've even smelt them ourselves. And so almost a sense check. And then seeing what we can do with them in the beer. And then we're also able to tap into that stuff at Auckland University to be able to test the hop, then the beer that you've put that hop into to see how it translates across. And then we can also go even deeper. And this is something we're only just starting to get involved in, looking at different ways of using that dry hop and the impact on the beer. At the Hāpi Symposium later this week, Peter Bircham, who I know you're going to be talking to later this week, he's got some very interesting results from that, looking at different temperatures of dry hop and then what that then equates to in the way the hops express themselves in the beer. It's pretty cool.
So where is this project, currently? Now, we should mention that getting a research project of this kind of scale underway is no small feat and has a lot of moving pieces. You'll also operate a brewery and have a normal business and all of the headaches that entails. And, and so also being involved in co-oping on this, research project seems like an immense amount of additional stress to layer in on.
We're pretty good at doing that, laying on extra stress.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
when did you start it? And, knowing that this is also a generational thing, takes these plants years and years to get to a point where you can actually have something that you can do something with.
Yeah. I think the funding kicked off in 2018. And look at it. I think we had very high hopes at the beginning of really rushing some things through, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's fascinating that you have a harvest, you have to wait a whole another year to be able to sort of then have another bite of the cherry. But I think we're getting to a very exciting point now where there are at least, 3 brand new varieties that have performed super well, not just in sensory, but then in beer. And then in the field. So, I mean, I think by next harvest, some of those may even be kind of commercially viable, which would be really cool.
How much research is Hāpi doing on the impact of things like pick timing and hop growing region, soil type? That seems to be another thing that we're hearing lots of folks talk about here in New Zealand.
Yep.
Trying to get a scientific understanding of how these things impact expression in these hops is interesting. What's Hāpi doing?
So, I mean, this is the first harvest where we've had access to the laboratory at Auckland University. And I mean, we've got a number of projects really doing exactly what you just said. It's one thing to do sensory and have an opinion. It's quite different to actually dig into something and have some really solid, tangible data. So
these are multivariate equations,
exactly.
Right? You have different growings. It's this season is different in terms of sunlight, in terms of rain, in terms of fertilizing. So you've got baseline changes already. Then you've got the terroir differences.
So many variables.
Then you've got you've got all of these other things.
So this is a super long-term project, obviously, and it's something we'll continue to do. This year, one thing that we're doing is looking at Nelson and Motueka, 2 super well-known Kiwi varieties, picking one field to work on, and then taking samples every day in that kind of meaningful picking window, and then sending those samples up to Auckland University and getting thiol testing and terpenes for each day to see what's happening as they mature, what's happening as
every single day. Interesting, yeah.
And that's going to be really interesting. And then the magical thing that you could maybe achieve is find some other variable that you can check in the field that you could then equate to these high points of aroma and flavor.
Oh, a marker of some sort, yeah.
Because at the moment, it's wet and dry weight. It's not super accurate. I mean, there's nothing that you can do in the field other than rub and hope that your sensory is on point. Wouldn't it be incredible? It's the magic bullet. If you have something that you can measure in the field, quantifiable, and then you can relate that to what is going to be happening with those chemical compounds. So that's one thing. We also want to be looking at, as I said before, if you know that a certain hop is very high in certain thiols, how is it translating into the beer? There's so many variables. You're absolutely right, but I mean, you've got to start somewhere.
How do you work this into the overall operation of the brewery? It still seems interesting to me that you have to carve out time to also work on this project in addition to managing that. So in a real world sense, are you meeting weekly, monthly, are there check-ins? Are there, more focused periods of time where you're working on this project and other times where you're more focused on the brewery? I
mean, there's definitely some very white hot periods of time post-harvest. We'll be getting as many samples into beers as possible. You want to be doing this when the hops are super fresh. Obviously, these novel varieties or whole cone, they're put in foil bags and purged with nitrogen, but we want to get them into a beer ASAP. What we don't want to do is miss something that's amazing simply because it's become oxidized and mature. So, we want to be getting that done straight away. And then we'll be moving on to sensory. After that, it becomes...
How many test beers this season?
There'll probably be 50 or so, I would imagine, or maybe even more. We do try to whittle down Joe just said before when I was chatting to him, he's got 1,600 that field of 3,000, he's picked 1,600, and we're going to have to try and whittle that down to speed date as many as possible to get it down to a number that we can then do some deeper sensory on. But do you know, I say it's like a needle in a haystack. It's actually not. It's actually surprisingly easy, because if something doesn't blow you away, then really what's the point? It has to be something that's absolutely mind-blowing. And that's, and it has to be mind-blowing for everybody who's doing the sensory, because obviously we try and have a broad range of people with different approaches to hops. So, yeah.
What are you most excited about for the next? Now Hāpi is going to continue as a project and has ongoing funding, and is looking forward to continuing work over the next decade or so. What are you most excited about tackling as bigger picture projects that Hāpi can have an impact on?
Definitely, selfishly, getting some of these new hops into a beer on a big scale. It's one thing to do a little test batch. It's another thing to produce, a proper batch of beer and sell it and get the feedback from people. Because at the end of the day, it's the drinkers and what they think of these hops that's the most important thing. So that's really exciting. And we've got 2 new varieties that we're going to be able to do that with when we get back to the brewery. That's really cool. And then after that, it's starting to really dig into brewing techniques with hops to see what we can achieve, with different methods, and the final beer using Auckland University. Like I said, this is a pretty new thing for us to be able to do.
Sure. And then there's going to be some phase as you find the things where it then passes into a more of a commercialization phase, from the research phase into the practice, kind of phase, and not quite there yet. And, don't exactly have,
no, but this is knowledge that will be, we want to make it widely available. Especially the brewing component. What we want to be able to say is, here are some really cool New Zealand hops. Here are the best ways to use them. This is what you're going to get out of it doing this with it. It's great.
You're saying that sharing more knowledge with brewers out there around the world might in some way encourage them to try these things, work with these things, and
I don't know
somehow
if brewers around the world probably don't need much more encouragement to work with New Zealand hops, but isn't it fun to be able to share with them some of this knowledge? That's
as we are right now too, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Well, let's talk about you selecting. As you jump into rubbing hops, what does your process look like? You've spent a lot of time around this. How do you think about how you set the right mindset, build a process for selecting hops for Garage Project?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, and despite having done it for quite a lot, I really don't think of myself as a massive expert. I don't know. Don't we all have those little voice in the back of the head, always wondering whether you could do better at something? I think that it's good. It keeps you sharp.
Don't tell me you have imposter syndrome on hop
constantly.
selection.
What do I like to do? I'm torn by this, Jamie, because at one point I was like, no, you just have to be really brutally quick about it. You can think yourself into a real pickle. Sometimes it's easy. You'll have a table and you go around. I like to really get in there. I like to rub it. Some brewers, and I think this is a cool thing to do, they'll rub it and they'll smell the hops, but then discard them and smell the resin on your hands.
Right.
And that is I like the thinking behind that. The resin,
what's left.
The resin's what you want.
Right.
It's warm on your hands and you can smell it. It's a little hard to go from, unless you're cleaning your hands thoroughly in between each one. It's hard to do that on a big table. So I did for a while. I was like, yeah, you just got to be real quick, whip round, and it's a snappy decision. But sometimes when things sit on the table and they warm up a little bit, they will develop and change. So it's worth spending a bit of time. It's probably like getting married. You don't rush in there. Get to know them. It's a little bit like that with the hops. So yeah, and quite often...
Do you do it as a team? Do you do it solo? How does that typically work? And then how do you think about imbuing, that kind of same sensory experience amongst members of a group?
That's a really good question. Different people will perceive hops in very different ways. Some people you could smell the same hop and have a completely different reaction to. I like it when you have somebody who is reasonably aligned to you. And this is the thing, Jamie, because we're all picking hops, but we're picking different things that we like. Thank goodness. Otherwise, every bloody brewery would taste the same,
Sure.
Yawn. So look, I like to do it in a very small group. Either just myself and someone else or alone. I find if there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, I find it a little bit distracting. And I don't think that distraction, you don't want to be thinking about it. You just want to be thinking about the hops. You want to be very mindful. Don't want anything else going on. I also like to, you don't want to be hungover either. I'm always interested when people go to a hop selection and they've been on the cans the night before and they're feeling like pretty close to death. I'm like, I don't think that necessarily going to be at your perky best.
Sure. There are those groups that, where if they've got multiple folks, picking, they will all kind of mark preferences and notes silently so that they're not impacting each other. And then be able to kind of come back together as a group and talk through all of those so that they're not biasing the process.
I like doing it with other people when you have a concern. Do you know what I mean? When you're like, I'm torn between these two. That then it's very useful to have that other person with you to be like, yeah, that one is a bit funky.
Sure.
Maybe we shouldn't. But it's always an interesting experience. Yeah.
Well, let's pull out here as we wrap up.
I realized I didn't finish talking about Riwaka. I probably should have finished talking about Riwaka.
Before I try to wrap this up, what else are you going to say about Riwaka?
I was simply going to say that, it is a fascinating hop. In New Zealand brewing law is that it needs to go in hot side. This is a fascinating thing, that you need to boil it a bit, blow off some of those volatiles. But it's also, I think, about that care and attention to picking windows, to terroir. It's a fascinating hop. I don't know if you've seen it in the field. It's sickly. It looks like shit. Farmers hate it. Farmers hate it traditionally because your field just looks rubbish. The cones are almost like little gold nuggets. They're puffy, round, yellow, but often the bine will hardly make it up the string to the wire. If you're lucky, it's made it to the top. One of the reasons why I'm so enamored with Nelson Lakes is that when I went up there for the first time, and you drive down this gravel road for half an hour and you're like, there's no way there's a bloody hop farm at the end of this. You can hear banjos playing in the distance. You're in the middle of nowhere. I've known people who've got, within 100 meters and turn back. So there can't be anything here. Suddenly you get down here. And we arrived there before they'd even set up a hop farm, but they had a test planting. And in that test planting, they had Riwaka. And that Riwaka was up the string and along the wire and grown. So there's something about that terroir that hop loves. And, for me, with that memory of where I wanted that hop to be, I was so excited. So, for me, it is, and that's the beauty of having lot selection, is that you can dig into this and you can say, this is the one I want. This farmer paid attention, because that's the problem, isn't it? When you homogenize everything together, what is the incentive for people to explore what they can do with their hops, to explore pushing quality in the same way? No one would ever suggest that as brewers we all get together and homogenize our beers. We'd never do that. That'd be ridiculous. There you go. Riwaka, yum.
You know what, Pete? That feels like a great place to just bring this to a close. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Why would we want to homogenize? Let's celebrate the difference
individuality,
the beauty of these different terroirs, different picking windows, and explore the beautiful flavors that these New Zealand hops have to share, even in things like a classic style throwback West Coast IPA with a little bit of sea malt in it as well. Works in so many different ways. But yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. G&D Chillers chills the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. Berkeley yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary. Old Orchard's R&D team is ready to work with you on custom blends and specialty ingredients. Taste the modern flavors of indie hops in 14 different beers, poured at their CBC booth 3122. SS Brewtech's Unitank 2.0 will help you get the most from your homebrew and pilot batch fermentations. Isuzu trucks are the trucks you trust for the work you do. Cytiva offers a comprehensive portfolio of laboratory filtration products designed for both lab and production floor use. And learn more about the 2025 Brewery Workshop at breweryworkshop.com. If you've enjoyed this episode and any others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, and help us continue to bring great conversations like this to you. Obviously, I'm a little bit selfish because I get to come down to New Zealand and experience hop harvest. Anyway, Pete, if people want to learn more about these beers, a garage project that you make, or some of the hops that you love, where do they find more? Whether it's about garage project, you personally, or whatnot.
Gosh, go on the internet, hey. There's lots of stuff on there.
We do have the internet. Sounds dangerous.
We have a rubbish website, but I'm pretty sure you could dig in there a bit. Social media. I'm sure there's some exciting stuff in there.
Sure. And if you're in the United States and want some garage project,
we will be pouring again. Lucky us at the Firestone Walker Invitational, which has to be the best beer festival, I think. Anywhere.
You'll find no argument for me on that. It's been I actually, up until this year, have not missed one since I started going in about 2016.
Oh my God,
I am going to have to miss it this year, and I'm tortured by that. But my niece is getting married the same weekend, and
that's worthwhile.
I cannot miss the family wedding there.
Don't do that. I won't be there, but the beautiful Joss Ruffle will be
doing something gastronomically inspired and theatrically dense.
I got something a little bit fun this year. Yeah. Just riffing on our layered beer, which is something it's close to our hearts. We love that kind of. That's the thing about a festival. I feel like you want to bring something that is unique that you wouldn't just be able to get when you go down to the local bar.
Sure.
People have paid a lot of money. Give them something. Entertain them. So we've got a very interesting little layered concoction, which should be fun. And I think Joss Ruffle will probably be wielding the hot poker as well, so beware.
Well, Paul from our team will be there representing Craft Beer and Brewing, and I can't wait to see the pictures of those beer experiences that you produce for the ultimate otaku crowd there. Pete, it's been great talking with you. Cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.